I'm Brittany Lewis with Forbes Breaking News. On the Senate floor Wednesday, Senator Roy Blunt echoed his Republican colleagues in calling for tougher border security. Blunt said that surges in border crossings have, quote, created a giant humanitarian crisis at the border. He supported Title 42, which comes after a federal judge blocked the Biden administration from ending the Trump-era migrant policy last month. Critics have decried the policy as a blatant attempt to keep migrants from entering the U.S., claiming the public health concerns are not genuine. Here's more from the Missouri Republican.
Madam President, normally I don't like to use numbers in speeches because I think numbers get lost in people's minds as they're trying to wrap their heads around numbers. But I do want to use some numbers today because the numbers are just so incredible. During President Biden's time in office, the Department of Homeland Security has encountered illegal immigrants crossing our border more than 2.8 million times. In not quite a year and a half, 2.8 million people were encountered crossing the border. Last month alone, they caught people trying to cross the southern border illegally 234,088 times. So 250,000 people just last month were caught trying to cross the border. That's the highest number in the department's history. It's more than 4 times the average monthly number from 2018 to 2020. Now, if you've got a problem that is 4 times bigger than it was in the 3 preceding years, probably time to ask what were they doing in those 3 preceding years that we're not doing now. Now, some of the people who crossed the border got sent back and may have gotten caught later in the month. They may have been a catch and release and then they come back, but some people who crossed the border didn't get caught at all. I'm not sure that number is not bigger than the other number, but even if you had double counting, it's still an incredible number. 250,000 people coming across the border illegally in 1 month that were caught. Not that we're coming across the border, that we're caught coming across the border. We've never seen such a massive or prolonged effort by people to illegally enter our country that we're seeing now. It's created a giant humanitarian crisis at the border. Ask anyone who lives in a border community the problem that's been created by this. The Biden administration's response has actually been to tie their own hands by removing the most effective tools that we had to try to manage the situation. We developed a reasonable approach to the border based on lessons we learned from previous surges, one in 2014 when President Biden was vice president, one in 2019. These policies helped cut the number of people trying to cross the border illegally. They allowed us to deal with legitimate cases of people seeking asylum in a much more responsible way. You know, people who actually qualify for asylum come to the United States like people don't come to any other country in the world. We are still the most welcoming country in the world for people who have a legitimate request for asylum, but that doesn't include everybody who lives in a poor and dangerous place. In contrast to what we've been doing to make it easier for people to seek asylum and harder for people to illegally cross the border, the Biden administration has over and over again reversed the progress that was being made. As Senator Ernst just well pointed out, first day they halted the construction of the border wall. You know, the logical debate to have there was finish the wall in progress and then have a debate with the new administration about whether you needed more border wall, but they halted construction of the border wall. The material was there, the wall was in progress. In fact, the wall in some places had been removed so you could put the more effective wall up, so there was no wall. There were places where we had known for several years now that people would come across if they could, where there was no wall, there was no building of the wall. They revoked a 2017 executive order calling for stricter enforcement of the immigration laws. They canceled the migrant protection protocols. They suspended asylum cooperation agreements known as safe third-party agreements, third country agreements. If someone is unsafe where they live and have a legitimate claim for asylum, this is not a legitimate claim for entry into the United States. It's a legitimate claim to get to a safer place for them. Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador all had agreed to those third-party, third-country agreements. Even the leaders of even Guatemala and Mexico said that President Biden's policies are incentivizing illegal crossings at our southern border, which of course create a lot of illegal transit through their country as well. Now the administration seems intent on ending the public health policy known as Title 42, which allows authorities to turn back many of the people caught crossing the border illegally. A federal judge issued a preliminary injunction blocking the efforts to eliminate Title 42, but the administration immediately decided they would appeal that decision. Now, that's exactly the wrong decision at this moment, particularly when the administration is arguing that we need billions of dollars of more money to fight COVID. And I think there's some merit to that argument, but you can't argue that we need billions of dollars to fight COVID and COVID is over at the border and it's no longer a problem there. In fact, it's just the latest example of the administration over and over again responding to the crisis at the border with the wrong decision. Time after time, the White House could have looked at problems that it was causing with its immigration policies and reversed course. And time after time, it responded by going ahead anyway, doubling down on more than one occasion. According to the New York Times, there are tens of thousands of people who've been waiting in the border region for Title 42 to be lifted. They're watching the Biden administration and the signals it's sending now and how it intends to deal with them the next time they cross the border. Most of them will be allowed to stay in the country while they go through immigration proceedings, many of which can take years to just get a hearing. That's why waiting in another country like Mexico was a policy that we should have continued to improve and move forward with, because most people, when they were waiting, would find out that they didn't have a legitimate asylum claim, that they weren't going to successfully get into the United States and disappear into the country that we live in, and they'd wind up going back and making it easier for other people who had a legitimate asylum claim to have that asylum hearing. What makes it worse, the administration's proposed taking away essential resources to enforce immigration law. With the budget that they requested for this year, the Department of Homeland Security specified cutting the enforcement and removal budgets for U.S. immigration and customs enforcement by $614 million. Doesn't sound like to me that that's the way to deal with a problem that's the size of the problem that almost every American has a sense of. In April, the Homeland Security Secretary said that he'll need to reprogram funding from other DHS accounts to respond to increased activity at the border, while the administration, his administration, is asking for a $614 million cuts. Other parts of the department, like the Coast Guard, the Transportation Security Administration, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, could have their operational funding diverted to process paperwork for illegal immigrants at the border. The human tragedy unfolding at our border is due in large parts to the policies of this administration, a massive turnaround that occurred on day one and hasn't stopped since. We need to act, and they need to act on border security effectively and restore order to our immigration process. It's long past time for the administration people to be honest with the American people about the crisis it's created and to do something about it.